I saw a Facebook post recently asking for stories from women who had been through divorce or separation, especially stories about how financial advice helped them through that time. And it made me think, not because I couldn't relate to the labels. I could. A woman, divorced, mother, migrant, someone who had to make financial decisions alone. All those words applied to me at different points in my life. But what made me pause was the story attached to those labels. The story seemed to be about vulnerability, women in difficult situations, women who need support, women who might be at a disadvantage. And I'm not saying that is wrong. Some women are in genuinely difficult, unsafe, or unfair situations. Some women absolutely need practical support, financial advice, legal advice, emotional support, community support. I'd never dismiss that. But when I looked at my own life, I realized something. I could relate to the labels, but not to the story of vulnerability attached to them. For me, that chapter of my life was not mainly a story of vulnerability. It was a story of hardship, yes, but also a story of independence, freedom, and eventually achievement. That surprised me because I had never really thought about it in that way before. The same facts can be told in two completely different ways. One story could say, here's a divorced migrant woman with two young children in a foreign country. That sounds like a disadvantage. Another story could say, here's a woman who had to grow up quickly, make decisions, learn new systems, study, work, raise children, rebuild a career, and find a way forward. Both stories start with the same facts, but they don't lead to the same identity. And that is what I want to talk about. Not the facts of hardship alone, but the meaning we attach to them. Because sometimes the label itself is not the most dangerous thing. The most dangerous thing is the story that comes with that label. When I first found myself in New Zealand with two young children, I was genuinely in a hard position. I was in a foreign country. I had to understand a new system. I had to think about my children, my future, my work, my education, my finances. I had to study, I had to work, I had to raise my children. I had to rebuild my life and in some ways rebuild myself. But there is something important here. Because I was new to the culture, I didn't fully understand the local labels. I didn't know that words like divorced woman, single mother, could carry a social meaning beyond the facts themselves. I didn't know they could be read almost like a code for disadvantage. And strangely enough, that protected me because I didn't know that I was supposed to see myself through those labels. I didn't look at my life and think, oh no, this is now a story of misfortune. I just got on with what needed to be done. I was thinking, what do I do next? What do my children need? How do I find work? How do I understand this country? And how do I build my life? I didn't feel strong first. I became stronger because life required action. We often think confidence comes first and then action follows. In my experience, it was the opposite. I acted while I was unsure, while I was learning, while I was scared. Confidence came afterwards from testing reality for myself. I did have help, and I want to be very clear about it. This is not a story about doing everything alone. I'm deeply grateful for the help I received. Friends helped me. People around me helped me. There were moments when support arrived exactly when I needed it. But I have learned there is difference between help and dependency. Help gives you the ability to use the opportunities in front of you. Dependency takes away your ability to make decisions and realize your dreams. The good support doesn't make you smaller. It helps you stand on your feet. Good support says, you are capable and I'll help you take the next step. That is also how I think about financial advice. Good financial advice should expand a person's sense of possibility, not just for women, for men too, for anyone. It should help people understand their options, see what's possible, and make decisions with more clarity. Bad advice can do the opposite. It can reinforce fear. It can make a label feel more powerful than it is in reality. And I experienced that. At one point, I wanted to buy a house. I was, in fact, in a relationship at the time, but I wanted to buy a house that I would own by myself. And this is important. In New Zealand, being in a relationship doesn't automatically mean you're making all financial decisions jointly. A person can be in a relationship and still need to make independent financial decisions. A woman can be in a relationship and still be financially responsible for herself. So I went to a mortgage broker. The way I experienced that conversation was that my divorce status became a warning sign. He seemed to have assumed that because I was divorced, the bank would not want to lend me money. The impact was immediate. I felt disempowered. More than that, I started to doubt myself. That is the real harm of a label when it comes through someone who sounds like an authority. They certainly can make you question your own future. In that moment, divorced did not feel like a fact about my past. It felt like something that could haunt me forever. That I would always be seen as financially risky. Maybe I would never be able to buy a house. Maybe this door was closed before I had even properly tried to open it. And this is how disempowerment works. It doesn't always come as an obvious insult. Sometimes it comes as a professional certainty. Sometimes it comes as someone else's assumption dressed up as reality. The broker submitted my application and it was declined. That could have been the end of the story. I could have said, that's it, he was right. The bank will not lend to someone like me. But I did not stop there. I went to the bank myself and applied directly. And the bank approved me for more than I expected. Since then, I bought more properties. But the point of the story is not simply I proved someone wrong. The point is that I learned something about independence and freedom. Independence is not about surviving alone. Independence is about the ability to test reality for yourself. It is the ability to say, someone may be certain, but I still need to find out what is actually true. Someone may see me through a label, but I don't have to accept that label as the final word. I was not confident when I went to the bank myself, but I acted anyway. I had nothing to lose. And confidence came after the action. That experience taught me that you don't need to feel ready before taking the next practical step. Sometimes the next step is how you become ready. When I look back now, I can see a sequence in my life. Hardship led to independence. Independence created freedom. Hardship led to independence because I had no choice. I had children, responsibilities, and decisions to make. Independence created freedom because I stopped waiting for someone else to approve me, rescue me, or tell me what was possible. And freedom made achievement possible because once I stopped living inside fear, once I faced my fear, I could build. I could build financial stability. I could build my career. I could raise my children while still becoming more of who I was meant to become. and I could become someone my children could learn from. That matters to me deeply, because my children were watching. They were not learning only from what I said. They were learning from how I lived my life. I could not behave as if hardship meant helplessness. I could not model a victim identity to them. That doesn't mean pretending everything is easy. It wasn't. It means showing them that life can be hard and you can still act in it. You can accept help without becoming helpless. You can be afraid and still take the next step. Strength is not always a feeling. Sometimes strength is what you practice when you have no other choice. And I'm proud of my children because I can see that they have learned this. Not because I lectured them, but because they saw it. They saw that a hard chapter does not have to become your whole identity. And this is where I want to talk about vulnerability. I don't think vulnerability is a problem. In fact, I think all humans are vulnerable. Even the people who look secure. Even the people who are well off, successful, protected, educated, confident. Every human being is vulnerable in some way. We can lose people we love. We can lose health, certainty, confidence, or even our life anytime. So vulnerability is not something that belongs only to divorced women, single mothers, migrants, people of certain race, or people with less money. Vulnerability is part of being a human. But vulnerability is also partly a perception. The same circumstances can make one person feel powerless and another person determined. The same label can become a prison for one person and almost irrelevant to another. So the question is not, are we vulnerable? Of course we are. The question is, what do we do with that vulnerability? Do we use it as a signal that we need help, wisdom, support, and love? Or do we turn it into an identity? That is where labels become dangerous. A label can describe a circumstance. Those words may describe something true, but they should not decide what becomes possible. They should not become a permanent identity or misfortune. And once society gives you a vulnerability label, you have to be careful not to internalize it. Because the most dangerous label is not the one other people use. The most dangerous label is the one you start using to explain why you can't act. This is a delicate thing to say because I don't want to sound like I'm blaming people who are genuinely struggling. I'm not. Some people are in a very difficult situation. Some people are unsafe. Some people are unsupported. Some people face real barriers that need real practical support. I'm not judging pain. I'm questioning what happens when pain becomes the explanation for everything. I understand why a label can be comforting. It can explain things. It can give language to pain. It can attract sympathy. But comfort is not the same as freedom. There is a difference between needing support and building your whole identity around needing support. There is a difference between saying, this happened to me and I need help, and saying, this happened to me and therefore I cannot become more. This is the line I care about. Because I've had hard chapters too. I know how tempting it can be to accept a ready-made story about yourself, especially when that story is repeated by media, campaigns, professionals, activists, or even people around you. Sometimes vulnerability stories attract attention. Sometimes they are used to sell services. Sometimes they are used to support a social or political argument. Sometimes individuals also benefit emotionally or financially from the label because it gives sympathy or removes pressure to act. And again, I want to say this carefully. Pain is real. But if pain becomes the whole explanation of your life, it can become another form of captivity. A victim identity can feel like protection, but it can also quietly take away your future. There is another layer to this for me. My path of exploring vulnerability has led me to faith. I don't want to turn this into a religious lecture because that's not the point of my reflection. But I cannot separate my understanding of strength from the idea that my strength does not come from me alone. On my own, I'm vulnerable. We all are. But there is something higher than myself that I can lean into, a spirit of love that gives us strength. For me, that is my reality. This is not about worshipping the self. It's not about saying I'm strong because I'm amazing and I need no one. That's not true. I have needed help, love, and support. And these things have been provided to me exactly when I needed them and as I needed them. To me, that is the manifestation of the spirit of love in my life. What I have come to believe is that labels can trap us in fear, but love works right through this. Love uncovers what's hidden behind the labels. It sees the full human being, beautiful, unique, capable, talented in our own ways, able to become more than the category we have been placed in. That is why I don't want to build my identity around vulnerability, because I don't believe vulnerability is the deepest truth about us. It is real, but it is not the whole truth. There is something deeper: courage, responsibility, dignity, love. There is the ability to act even when we are afraid. There is the ability to receive help without surrendering our agency. There is the ability to become free inside even before life looks perfect on the outside. So when I saw that post asking for stories about divorced women, which implied financial vulnerability, it made me think. I could relate to those labels, but not to the story of vulnerability attached to them, because my story is that hardship pushed me into independence. Independence created freedom, and freedom made achievement possible. Not overnight, not easily, not without help, not without fear, but still, it happened. And I wonder how many other people are living under a story that was attached to them before they had a chance to question it. A story about being too disadvantaged, too damaged, too late, too alone, too much of a risk, too far behind, too defined by what happened. So I want to end this episode with a few questions. Have you mistaken a hard chapter for your whole identity? Are you using a label to explain your life or to avoid changing it? Who benefits when you keep seeing yourself as vulnerable? And is the story attached to your label actually true? Maybe the label describes something that happened. Maybe it describes a real circumstance. Maybe it even points to a place where support is needed. But it doesn't have to decide what becomes possible. A hard chapter can become the beginning of freedom, not the end of possibility.